Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's grain market blast. It is Wednesday, the 9th of April, all day. You're joining myself and the awesome Angie Setzer. Oh, one sec, let me just invite her in. Um, where Angie will be giving you a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I will give the legals out the way, or get the legals out the way, should I say. Nothing discussed on this spaces session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ or indeed that of the hosts, which, as you know by now, is myself, Mr. Ryan Paisley, and the wonderful Angie Setzer. How are you?
I am super. Thanks for asking. How
I'm
are you?
super. Thanks for asking.
That's what I feel like. That's just my answer. I don't say I'm living the dream when anyone calls and is like, "How are you doing?" I say, "I'm super. Thanks for asking." And it's kind of a vibe check. Those that get
Yeah,
it, are cool, and those that don't are still cool because they work with me and stuff, but not quite as
not
cool.
not
But
as
anyway,
cool. Yeah, not as
yeah,
cool.
it's a ranking, but,
Yeah.
happy Wednesday. It feels like, we've shoved a month into this week, another week
What a
of a
year this
month's
week has
worth
been.
of yeah, it has been a great time. So where are we at? I'm not really sure. I will try to update you as best I can, though. So we did see China, obviously. I think the big news story of the day is China's retaliation, though, what does it mean if you triple stamp a double stamp? It's kind of been the ongoing joke. I posted a Dumb and Dumber GIF. That's basically our negotiation at this point in time. Is we're just, whacking each other in the knee, basically. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Trump doesn't respond to China's escalation. So basically, yesterday the administration announced shortly after noon that the China would get that 50% fee that Trump had threatened. Right? It was kind of a thought that it was just a threat, maybe kind of a hollow one, just to generate conversation. Yesterday morning, he had kind of acted as though he was a little optimistic that that would stoke or spur conversation between he and she, which I think is what it is. Like, I think he just wants Xi to call him up, and like China's like, that's not how we negotiate, yo. And Trump's like, that's how I negotiate, and so here's where we are at this point. And so the 50% came on shortly after noon yesterday, or at the very least, they announced it. There was some confusion that it started at noon, but it does look like it came on, basically at midnight with all of the other reciprocal tariffs yesterday. Initially, China's response was kind of low key. Everyone was a little relieved. Like, I came in this morning, right? Beans were up a dime, and corn was up a couple. Not really anything shocking. They kind of said, yeah, we're going to stimulate our economy. We'd really rather talk about this. They put out a white paper. They did indicate that they could raise tariffs or whatever, but no real formal announcement. And then all of a sudden, here this morning, kind of, I'm going to say out of the blue, but it wasn't, right? But it was just kind of randomly at like 5:01, 6 o'clock. I'm not even sure what time. They were like, hey, yeah, we're going to add our 50% fee. So, basically at this point, we're kind of in an embargo, or at the very least we're just kind of I would say a pause on trade. Like,
Yeah.
there's stuff that's being shipped that's going over, there's stuff that's being shipped that's coming here. They're not going to disrupt the shipment of beans, or cancel that. At least that's the indication from traders. Most of what's been purchased from the US that's in transit was bought by Sino anyway. Sino's a government entity. Does
Yeah.
the government write themselves the check? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What does that really look like? And when it comes to feed grains, corn and wheat, especially, China wasn't really in the market to buy anything from the US anyway. And so, the news of the other negotiations and things like that is what really is kind of supporting those markets at this point in time, in my opinion. So it's really the first thing that we're looking at is obviously, pretty significant escalation between the US and China. But again, I'm going to reiterate that this is the best time for us to have an escalation. We weren't really going to be aggressively selling beans into China anyway for the next several months. We weren't selling that corn and wheat like we talked about. And so now is the time, the better time for negotiation in ags. Like, for everyone else, I'm sorry. Obviously I too am a consumer. But most everyone's kind of just like, yeah, it's gonna raise the cost of stuff if it makes it cost prohibitive to where I feel guilty buying it. You know what I mean? Like that $4 t-shirt or whatever, like, do you need it? No. Do you still buy it? Sure, you can't afford not to. But like, if it becomes 8 or 12 or 14, do you start to think twice about it? Potentially. And I guess, that's obviously what the outside market and everyone else is worried about. So point one, China. Anything there,
No,
Ryan, you
all
want to?
good, all good.
All right, just trucking along then.
Trucking along.
Point two,
Well,
which
it rhymes
maybe
with trucking.
trucking, right? One of these things today. It's Wednesday. Happy
Oh
Wednesday.
God.
But so point two, obviously good news. I feel like now we need to get confirmation from the administration, and it's probably going to be maybe a week or two before we get the final proposal. But we did get a glimmer of hope yesterday when U.S. Trade Representative Office head Jameson Greer testified in front of the Senate Finance Committee and was asked about the port fees. Like his talk on tariffs should not have surprised anyone. Like he
No.
was the under dude, second in line basically at the USTR last go around. He was really important in the phase one trade deal. They, kind of took the hard line on China and stuff like that. And so for Greer to be very supportive of tariffs and the president's policies when it comes to that side of things, not surprising. But when it came to the port fees, what made me very happy was that he said that they were not going to all be implemented as proposed and they wouldn't be stacked. And so one of the biggest things that we had been worried about was that if you stack the fees, you're talking $3 million plus. On top of that, it kind of gave maybe, to me anyway, a glimmer of hope that you just
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
see
definitely.
commodities attached or commodities added into that. And so we have seen this morning here an article from the Wall Street Journal. We did see Reuters come out and say six different sources had told them that we would see a softer approach from the USTR when it came down to it. Like the next port fee would kind of give some loopholes or at least reduce very, very reduced fees for agriculture exports, which makes sense. I mean, this administration, like a lot of people are like, oh, they hate China so much, they're going to do this. And it's like, okay, yeah, but he's also requiring that these other countries take these ag exports and things like that. Like you can't have both things, right? You can't have take all of these exports and it's also going to cost you $2 more a bushel or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they didn't necessarily make sense, but we did see in the journal this morning that they are looking to roll back or at least water down the fees, change the fees, not impact commodities. I mean, soybeans were specifically mentioned in the article, and lumber and things like that. And so it just makes sense to me that you'll probably see an enacted, like the fees will be enacted in a certain way. But probably you're going to see a loophole reduction, something like that when it comes to ag exports, which is super mega huge. We needed that. And so yeah, I'm going to hold my breath until we get confirmation, but I would think that the administration would use its brain here, and anyone can yell at me if they want to because it's always a little bit politically oriented when you say something like that. But I mean, it's just common sense. You're not going to push increased exports and then try to punish them.
Yeah.
And so that is in and of itself supportive. Um, and then, point three really is just negotiations. We're going to see what else happened. We did see the reciprocal tariffs come into effect last night at midnight. Even if you were making that deal, Trump told a group of Republicans last night, and this is a quote, that they were kissing his ass, that they were lining up, they were dying to make a deal. And so, we're seeing that. That's always a great thing in negotiation is to, but anyway, um, my cat just totally knocked over my computer's
What the
monitor.
hell was
Yeah,
that?
I am sorry. My cat is a jerk. Totally just computer monitor on the ground.
What's your
Anyway,
cat's name? What's your cat's name?
Felix, and he
Oh,
needs to. Yeah, I've been
so
waiting
so
for
so
this
so,
day. I
so
apologize.
I'm gonna have to start adding Felix to the
Right.
like the little thing at the
I'll send
top.
you a picture. He and Ian would get along great, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
But yeah, so we're just gonna be watching. I apologize to anyone listening that got to hear that. But we'll be watching the negotiations and all of that comes, next. There is talk that Japan, South Korea, are going to be sending delegations, that we may be announcing a trade deal. There were some rumors circulating this morning. Someone had posted, obviously, I haven't seen any sort of official response or any sort of official confirmation on it, but it does sound like you will see, Japan, South Korea, like these types of trade deals announced. India says that they're working on their bilateral deal. We have a lot of people that are lining up. And so that's going to be something that we'll be watching. And really, the market and the grain side of things is focusing on that. That if we do see an increase in these exports and a rollback of these port fee concerns and some of these other things,
Yeah,
it's supportive, and so here we are.
wicked.
Yeah, I mean,
Awesome.
there's not much else to. I mean, there's lots of other stuff. We'll be watching ethanol numbers today to see if exports continue. Like, we obviously have a bit of a pause in trade. We need to get a lot of gain a lot of certainty that we don't have,
Yeah,
But from an overall standpoint, I would say grains are doing relatively well in the face of everything else, and for a reason. Obviously, like, we're ahead of a growing season. We have a lot of uncertainty, as to what will happen when it comes to demand.
yeah,
Specifically, biofuels is one thing I almost forgot to mention. We are seeing kind of a unified sort of push towards an increased RVO, like an increased
yeah,
renewable volume obligation that's supportive, to domestic demand. If we could see the industry come out, in support of that, and also, maybe a return. Well, we'll need to see a return of the biofuel blenders credit or something like that. There's a few
yeah.
things that we need to see. But at this point, I would say we've kind of factored in the worst case scenario for grains. And really,
Well, and
grains may
also,
not be the one that get the worst case scenario situation play out for
no,
them.
absolutely. And this is the thing, and as we kind of brushed on yesterday, that yeah, energy and ag imports for like from third countries, they're the low hanging fruit to kind of shrink the deficit or between
Yeah,
themselves and the US. So we've already seen Indonesia come out and say we specify soy, as well as LNG. We're seeing the same with other nations, and if they need to, if Trump's basically saying, look, it doesn't really matter what you put your tariffs, but you also need to be buying more US. A very easy thing for them to do is buy US energy and US grains.
yeah,
So kind of does make sense that the two winners out of this might be anyone involved in natural gas, kind of production or transportation, and then obviously LNG and then LNG shipping. Those names seem to be the ones that you would think might do better, as well as anyone in the ag space. Because again, for Indonesia, they're like, okay, well, we need to buy X billion more a month from the US. Okay, well, we'll take a few LNG shipments and a few grain shipments. That's again, no trading advice or whatever, but it is the low hanging fruit, and thankfully, for the guys out there listening, hopefully that's good news.
yeah. Yeah, I think it would make much more sense this go around if we're going to trade war, and really, really dig in with China, and maybe it's wishful thinking on our part. We'll have to see how this all plays out. Like, obviously, no one really knows. But I do feel like the doom and gloom, the negative ideas, when it comes to ag commodities, especially. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what this means for treasuries or your container of T-shirts or whatever. But for ag commodities this go around, I think it could be quite different, especially because we've already, everyone loves to talk about how China has changed its buying, and its appetite to Brazil because of the trade war. Well, the U.S. also, kind of diversified its demand structure as well because of the trade war. And
Yeah,
so we're a little bit, like, I'm not going to say it's not something that isn't going to be major if it's still ongoing 5 months from now. But at this point in time, in the short term, it is one of those things, especially if we can get clarity on the port fees.
yeah.
You're likely to see an increase, or at least a continued indication of strong demand for corn out of the U.S., strong demand for wheat out of the U.S. Soybeans might be a little bit more tepid, but the soybean export program is basically wrapped up at this point. That's how it works every year. And
Yeah,
so we have some time to see what could happen, and I think that's why you're seeing grains be a little bit more resilient in the face of everything else.
just whilst we've been talking, quite an odd Truth Social post from Trump. He's quoting Jamie Dimon, obviously the JP Morgan chairman CEO, that's on some radio or TV show right now. Um, oh, sorry, who was on a radio TV show, but Trump's literally just posted this quote: "Fixing trade and tariffs is a good thing," and he's quoting Jamie Dimon. I don't think he's realised that Jamie Dimon is basically saying that Trump needs to fix it for the market to come back and bounce. But yeah, it's an interesting tweet anyway. So maybe this is a sign that he is looking to get things sorted. I don't know.
Yeah, we have seen Diamond say he came out this morning and said his worry of the recession has increased. Right, he'd written in that art that
Yeah,
letter to investors a while back that there was some concern. I say a while back; it was like the start of this week. It feels like a year ago. That they had some concern, and so yeah, I think they know that they need to get a rapid fix. I think that's what they're working on. Like, I feel like there is a lot of that negotiation. The China situation is, that's what you saw out of Ascent this morning, is where he was like, "Listen, we're trying to make a trade." Basically, he said, "We're trying to make a trade deal with everyone else so we can team up against China."
yeah, no,
And
exactly that.
so we'll see, basically what he said. At the end of the day, we can probably reach a deal with our allies. then we can approach China as a group, is what the
Yeah,
quote was. And so that kind of gives you an indication into what the administration is thinking, I think, to a certain extent, and be something that we continue to watch, and yeah, factor into to prices and all of that good stuff. But for now, here we sit, right? It's a constant flow of news every day, and so far so good on the grain side of things with how they're reacting. We'll just see if they're able to remain somewhat impervious if we can get these deals put together.
absolutely. And Angie, thank you so much for giving us your words of wisdom. Listeners as well, thank you so much for tuning in, especially our regular ones. We really appreciate you. And yeah, come back tomorrow where there'll be loads more news to talk about.
Yeah, we'll
But
make
until
sure
then,
we'll make sure Felix
yeah.
doesn't chime in.
Oh no,
Hopefully.
I think we need more
Yeah, I
Felix.
was
We
gonna
need
say I
more
don't think my
Felix.
computer monitor will take another tumble the second time around. So we'll see.
Oh, that's exactly what I was in my head. That's exactly what happened. The
Oh,
cat knocked the monitor over.
I couldn't grab it. I couldn't swear at him. It was beautiful. So here we are. Welcome to the day. But yeah, we'll see what the day
Brilliant.
brings. See what tomorrow brings. We'll be back with more.
Cool. Awesome. See you all tomorrow.
Thank
Bye.
you.